So the first question that I'm going to review is if during the assessment period there are 3 documented levels of function by 3 different clinicians prior to any benefit from therapy, which is determined to be end of day 2, and they coded the patient a 2, 3, and 4, what is the most usual performance code to be documented on the IRF-PAI? And the answer is, the intent of the admission assessment is to describe the patient's status prior to the patient benefiting from the implementation of the treatment plan. The assessment should be done close to admission during the first 3 days. If the patient's ability to perform an activity was assessed more than one time during the admission assessment timeframe, and there are differences in the patient's level of ability, clinicians should consider why there is variation. For example, was each instance based on a clinical assessment where the patient was allowed to perform the activity as independently as possible? Are there circumstances such as poor sleep or the new environment that are impacting the patient's ability? If variation is based on patient condition, for example, a patient with rheumatoid arthritis might need more assistance in the morning compared to the afternoon, whereas a patient recovering from stroke may experience fatigue in the evening and require more in the morning and require more help in the evening. Code what is best representing the patient's status, not what happened once, but what is usual performance, i.e. happening most of the time. If the patient performed the activity during the 3-day assessment period, code the activity based on the type and amount of assistance needed by the patient during the assessment period. The exception is the instance when the patient has significantly benefited from the implementation of the treatment plan by the 3rd day. The next question reads, if a patient cannot complete the task because they state they are simply tired, fatigued, or exhausted, should that be coded as a refusal or an 88 medical condition or safety concern? For example, for 12 stairs, they complete 8 and say they are done. And our answer is, please use your clinical judgment based on the patient's circumstances. If you or the patient believe there's a safety concern, code 88, not applicable due to medical or safety concerns. If your determination is that the patient is refusing without a medical issue or safety concern behind the refusal, code 07, patient refused. If the patient completes the activity once during the assessment period, code based on the type and amount of assistance provided. The next question, in GG, if a patient did not use an assistive device prior to admission, should you then assess the patient without the device during the evaluation? Would the therapist introducing a device be considered a therapeutic intervention? And our answer reads, a patient can be assessed using an assistive device that the patient has previously used or a new device that requires only simple instructions from a clinician in order for a patient to use it safely. If a new device requires a clinician to provide complex instructions for safe patient use, this would be considered implementation of the treatment plan. Has CMS considered using a qualifier for shower bathe self in section GG? A patient may bathe in bed at admission and in the shower at discharge. The score may not reflect progress or may even reflect regression because CMS states we can assess bathing anywhere in any position. And our answer is, coding for the item is based on the type and amount of assistance required to complete the activity, regardless of where the activity occurs. The next question is, in a situation wherein a patient has an interrupted stay during the admission assessment period, can assessment documentation be used on the same day that a patient leaves the facility? For example, admitted on Tuesday, assessed on Wednesday, goes to acute care on Wednesday, returns on Friday. Our answer is, for section GG of the IRF-PAI, when an interrupted stay occurs during the 3-day assessment period, the assessment period accommodates the interrupted stay. In the scenario you describe, assessment data can be used from Wednesday. The next one was some feedback, and it reads, GG0130 and GG0170, the scale does not provide opportunities to capture the amount of resources needed, nor show appropriate functional change at the lowest levels. Levels 1, 2, and 3 need to be redefined or further broken out to capture more refined levels of patient function for payment and quality. And we thank you for this feedback. We will take this into consideration. The next question is, determining percent of tasks is not well explained for each item. Some appear to have the same rules as some of the FIM items, but is not clearly stated. Please clarify how to determine percent for items assessed. And our answer is when coding section GG0130 self-care or GG0170 mobility items, code based on the type and amount of assistance provided. A decision tree is available on the QRP training webpage, or for those of you here today in your packets, in your folders, to help guide clinicians through the questions they should answer when determining how to code section GG activities. The next question. If the post-acute care comparison grouping national average is so incredibly low for the IRF setting, when will CMS consider no longer requiring reporting of such measures as it is evident within the number of falls with major injury, new or worsening pressure ulcers, and presumably the medication quality indicators? CMS is continually monitoring the performance of the measures in relation to the meaningful measures framework and will continue to do so. The next question says, IRFs still have relevant questions or concerns related to the assessment of GG items. Based upon the questions or concerns posed this week as well as last year, does CMS regard the first 2 years of data as reliable and valid for use in measuring quality and or defining CMGs for payment? And our answer is yes. Our analysis shows section GG items are better predictors of resource use than the FIM. Reliability and validity analyses are available on the NQF website. The next question is, why is cane not on the list for prior to admission equipment? Our answer is, the devices listed in item GG 0110, prior device use, are included on the IRF-PAI because they are risk adjusters for functional outcome measures. When we were developing the functional outcome measures, we did test whether prior use of cane or crutches affected either self-care or mobility outcomes, and we found that these devices did not affect the functional outcomes. For that reason, we did not need to include these items on the list of devices. The next question says, if a patient does not have clothing on the day of admission, do you code 10 not applicable due to environmental limitations or lack of equipment for dressing? And our answer is, if a patient does not have any clothing other than a hospital gown during the entire 3-day admission assessment period, you would code 10 not attempted due to environmental limitations for GG 0130F upper body dressing. The intent of this item is to assess the patient's clothing that would be worn in the community. If clothing is available by day 3, code based on the assessment conducted on that day. If clothing is not available by day 3, paper scrubs could be used in order to assess the activities of upper body dressing if no other clothing is available. The next question is, can CMS provide patient-level data for claims-based measure? Receiving this data as a single aggregate number isn't actionable for providers. And our response is, for the IRF-QRP, patient-level reports for claims-based measures, including the IRF readmissions measures, are not currently available. The procedures for following HIPAA regulations differ for post-acute care measures, given that the data comes from multiple covered entities. Although we are unable to provide the information requested at this time for the IRF Quality Reporting Program, we are actively investigating avenues by which greater detail may be made available. We hope to have additional information for the IRF Quality Reporting Program soon, and really appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Manisha. We decided today that we were going to mix up answering the questions, so you guys didn't have to listen to me the whole time. So I'm going to answer the next set, and then Anne's going to follow up with the third set of questions. So our next question is, if a patient has no bathing order due to a new cardiac monitor placement, such as a loop monitor, but performs a partial sponge bath, avoiding the area that cannot get wet, do you code this situation 88 or score according to the amount of assistance needed for the partial sponge bath? And our answer is, assessment of shower bathe self can take place in a shower or bath or at a sink, for example, a full body sponge bath. If the patient bathes with a sponge bath, code based on the level of assistance needed for the patient to wash, rinse, and dry the face, upper and lower body, and perineal area and feet. Our next question is, when a patient has an interrupted stay during the 3-day admission assessment period, can the assessment data that was charted on the day the patient left the IRF be used on the IRF-PAI, or should the patient have a whole new functional assessment upon return to the IRF? And our answer, for section GG of the IRF-PAI, when an interrupted stay occurs during the 3-day assessment period, the assessment period accommodates the interrupted stay. Assessment data from the day the patient left the IRF can still be used. Our next question, are hands and face involved in bathing? And our answer is, shower bathe self includes the ability to wash, rinse and dry the face, upper and lower body, perineal area, and feet. Do not include washing, rinsing, and drying the patient's back or hair. My next question is, please give details regarding the supporting documentation necessary to support care tool scoring. And our answer is, documentation in the medical record is used to support assessment coding of section GG. Data entered should be consistent with the clinical assessment documentation in the patient's medical record. My next question, without the FIM, how is the GG going to capture appropriate CMG and for outcome measures accurately? And similar to a question that we had earlier, our analysis shows that the section GG items do a better job of capturing resource use in the IRF setting than the FIM. My next question, is a dress or a muumuu considered for upper body dressing? For those of you that don't know what a muumuu is, it's very similar to a shirt. So our response is, these items would be included for coding upper body dressing. Upper body dressing items used for coding include a bra, t-shirt, undershirt, button-down shirt, pullover shirt, dresses, sweatshirt, sweater, and pajama top. We should probably add muumuu to that list. Upper body dressing cannot be assessed based solely on donning and doffing a hospital gown, but we would consider a muumuu. For lower body dressing, can underwear or an incontinence brief alone be coded? And our response is, the intent of this item is to assess the patient's ability to dress in clothing that would be worn after discharge, for example, in the community. As an aside, I hope someone's wearing a little bit more than underwear or an incontinence brief in the community. If clothing is available by day 3 of the admission assessment period, we would ask that you code based on the assessment conducted that day. Pajama bottoms or paper or fabric scrubs may be used to assess the activities of lower body dressing if no other clothing is available. My next question, will the tiers B, C, D identified by the ICD-10 codes be included in the IRF manual? As of right now, the list of tier comorbidities can be located in the fiscal year 2019 final rule data files that are located on the IRF-PPS website. I can provide the link to you guys, but that's where they're located right now, and based on this question, we are looking at incorporating them in the manual. My next question, are you going to provide the rationale answers in written form for participants to have from the practice coding scenarios? That's a great question. The versions of the slide decks with the answers to the practice scenarios and the knowledge checks and rationales for case studies will be posted after the training, along with a link to the playlist of the video recordings of presentations and the Q&A documents for the training. All of the materials will be posted on the IRF QRP provider training webpage, and Econometrical will send everyone a link that registered for the training. They will all get links to the documents when they're available. My next question is in regards to my clarification yesterday on the FIM. So the question is, thank you for clarifying the change on the FIM, but doesn't CARF, C-A-R-F, require that we track FIM change? So my response to that is CMS does not require the submission of the FIM data, as I previously stated, and while CMS is not associated with CARF, we believe that the CARF does not specify the data collection tool used to meet their requirements, and we recommend that you reach out to the CARF for additional clarification. The last question I'm going to answer for you is, I also want to know if we no longer have FIMs to generate a CMG, how will IRFs receive reimbursement and the estimated length of stays? I would ask that the individuals asking this question refer to the fiscal year 2020 IRF-PPS proposed rule that you can find on the Federal Register. There is an in-depth discussion on the proposed revisions to the case mix system that will incorporate the section GG items. And then, of course, any comments that you may have on that, please submit using the formal comments to the proposed rule. This time I'm going to turn it over to Ann to finish up with the Q&A.
Thank you. All right, next question. What changes will be made to the pre-admission screen in relation to FIM items? Will there be replaced with the QIs? So the response to that question, CMS does not require the FIM to be part of the patient's pre-admission screen. The decision to use or not use this information should be based on facility policy and procedures. Therefore, the pre-admission screen requirement is not being changed with the implementation of IRF-PAI version 3.0. Next question. The IRF-PAI manual states assessment is to occur prior to the patient benefiting from treatment interventions. In the past, CMS also referenced therapy, therapy services, and therapeutic interventions. This nomenclature has caused confusion. Please clarify treatment interventions, ? Nursing treatment, ? So I think Manisha covered part of this, and I'll just reinforce the intent of the admission assessment is to describe the patient status prior to the patient benefiting from the implementation of the treatment plan. Next question, are all falls reported or just the major injuries? So item J 1800 asks if the patient has had any falls since admission. If the fall has occurred since admission, you would code J 1900 with the number of falls since admission resulting in no injury, injury, or major injury. CMS publicly reports falls with major injury as required by the IMPACT Act. Next question. Are there any efforts for CMS to consider adding case level risk adjustment for Section J health conditions, number of falls since admission? In addition, is it possible to change the measure from a range code to the actual number of falls during the rehab stay? This would aid in benchmarking/outcomes. So the measure application of patients experiencing one or more falls with major injury, which is modification of NQF 0674, is not risk adjusted. During the development of this measure, a technical expert panel concluded that risk adjustment of this quality measure concept was not needed because it is each facility's responsibility to take steps to reduce the rate of injurious falls, especially since such events are considered never events. Risk adjusting for falls with major injury could unintentionally lead to insufficient risk prevention by the provider. We thank you for your suggestion regarding reporting the actual number of falls for each category in J 1900 number of falls since admission instead of the current coding. The IRF-PAI item J 1750, history of falls, is used as part of the risk adjustment for the functional outcome measures because the history of falls is associated with less improvement in mobility. The next question asks, how is NQF number 2636 quantified? Why does it reference long-term care hospitals? So we actually think that you're asking about quality measure 2631. So that is the application of the percent of long-term care hospitals with an admission and discharge functional assessment and a care plan that addresses function. The title of this quality measure includes LTAC because the quality measure was originally endorsed as a quality measure for the LTAC setting. CMS modified the measure for cross-setting use, and thus has called it application of, and then the measure name that is the NQF endorsed quality measure. The specifications for calculating the assessment-based quality measures are included in the Inpatient Rehab Facility Quality Reporting Program Measures Calculation and Program Users Manual, and that can be found on the website that was included in the presentation that I gave about the functional outcome measures. And that will be available in a document with the link when these are provided in writing. In fact, the next question is, would you please put the questions and answers presented in writing? You're moving through them too quickly to keep up. The written version of the Q&A document will be posted on the IRF-QRP training website. We will mail all of those registered to attend who attended this training in person and online when the Q&A document is available. So obviously you'll get all the links that way. Next question, how would I score bed chair if the patient does not use a bed? They sleep in a recliner. If the patient uses a recliner, sofa, or mattress on the floor as their bed or their preferred sleeping or necessary sleeping surface, assess the patient's need for assistance using that sleeping surface when determining the ability to perform bed mobility activities, including rolling left to right through the bed chair transfer. Next question, is sit to stand included as part of GGO 170E chair bed chair transfer if the patient does a stand pivot transfer with or without device use? Item GGO 170E chair bed chair transfer begins with the patient sitting in a chair or wheelchair or sitting upright on the edge of the bed and returning to sitting in the chair or wheelchair or sitting upright in the edge of the bed. Next question, prior to therapeutic intervention, example, what if the patient will probably need a walker for standing or walking? Should the therapist try to stand the person first, score an 88 for the activity, then provide a walker if needed, then instruct on its use? So I think Manisha covered this a little bit also. A patient can be assessed using an assistive device that the patient has previously used or a new device that requires only simple instructions for a clinician in order for patient to use it safely. If a new device requires the clinician to provide complex instructions for safe patient use, this would be considered implementation of the treatment plan. Will the webcast be available after Friday? If so, how could I access it? The response to that, playlist with video recordings of the presentation will be available on the CMS YouTube site. We will email you when they are posted. And I believe this is the last one. Will the decision tree video be available in the download sections for us at a later date? The answer to that, the post-training version of the GG presentation will include live links to the videos. Additionally, the full-length videos for prior functioning, section GG decision tree, oral hygiene, and lying to sitting are currently under development. They will also be incorporated into an e-learning training that is currently under development. As stated earlier, when these resources become available, you will receive an email from the PAC training mailbox with information about how to access them. So that is indeed my last. I will pass it back to Katie.
I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time again to come out to Kansas City to participate in our training. It is it really means a lot to CMS and definitely to me as the program coordinator that you guys have taken the time out of your busy schedules to, for many of you, fly out here to spend a full 2 days with us. It really shows that you're dedicated to not just your programs, your facilities, but also your patients and doing what's best for them and ensuring that you and your staff are able to appropriately, document on your patients. And I just really want to thank everybody. I know that it's not easy to take the time out of your busy schedules away from your patients and away from your facilities to come out to our trainings, but we do genuinely appreciate your participation in our training. So thank you so much for coming. Please feel free to keep the questions coming into our IRF-QRP help desks. We are always available to help answer your questions. For any questions that were not answered yet, we are simply still researching the answers, so just be patient. We will have all of the questions and answers, the documents finalized, and they'll be posted online, as we just recently mentioned. But also, again, please always feel free to reach out with any further questions that you have. We're here to support you. And again, keep the feedback coming. We really love the feedback, and we do take it very seriously, and we take every bit of feedback that we get into consideration. So thank you so much for everything, and I hope that everybody has a safe flight home. Thank you. Or a safe trip home for those of you that aren't that far away. So, thank you so much.